welcome back to another video. Today I am once again using my diluted acrylic paints as a background for this week's creation. The way I make them is by simply putting just the smallest amount of acrylic paint into these dropper bottles and then filling them up with water and shaking them until I feel that they have diluted enough so that they kind of act like watercolor paints. Why do I do that? I don't know. I just one day decided that I wanted to try it out and I quite like it. It has a little bit of a different feel than watercolors in a sense that because I'm dripping them on the paper and then I have to use quite a bit of water to make them move, they will just go everywhere and I don't really have a lot of control over what it's going to look like in the end. Sometimes that can wreak a little bit of havoc on my piece. Sometimes I feel that it's not going anywhere and the piece is lost. And sometimes it works out quite well. Usually I end up questioning what it's going to look like and feeling that I might have to scrap it or I might have to put this in the maybe pile. And this one here was no different. Honestly, I'm not sure what I was expecting. I wanted to use the yellow and the burnt sienna together just to give it a little bit of an earthy warmth. But the main focus was going to be the blue and the green. I didn't have a dark green, so I was hoping that by mixing the yellow and the blue together, I would get a darker green, which I was pleased to say did happen. I use regular painter's tape when I tape down my paper, and my paper is just your standard watercolor paper. I use a pretty hefty tape because I use a lot of water when I do this, and so if I don't tape down my pages, my paper enough, that water and the paint mixture will seep through. So I'm just working on this background. I'm not really sure exactly what I want it to look like. I felt that the blue wasn't diluted enough, so I added a little bit more water and that seemed to help. Also, that green could have used a little bit more water, and I should probably do that right now before I forget again. I liked that the blues have stained the background quite a bit, and that sometimes happens with these acrylic paints, especially when you put a certain color down right in the beginning. They tend to stain the paper quite nicely, and so if that is something that you want, make note of that because that first color will stay quite nicely. So if the first color is the color that you want to see predominantly on your paper, then that's what you should use. I wanted it to feel light and fresh, but I like those darker focal points, so that's why I was bringing in the dark green. Here you see me mopping up the leftover paint that was just sitting there. Like I said, because I use a lot of water, that paper will get very saturated and it starts to buckle, and then the paint will collect within those buckles. So I sometimes find myself mopping up the leftover water and paint mixture. I then walked away from it and let it completely dry overnight because it was quite wet. That was the night before, and I also did 2 more backgrounds because I wasn't happy with the way this one looked when it was wet, and I wasn't sure whether I was able to use it, whether it would spark something in me. So I did make 2 more backgrounds, and then when I came back in the morning, it was the first thing that I did when I woke up. I don't usually go in my studio straight away, but I was very curious to see how they all dried, and because I wasn't confident enough to continue with this one, I wanted to see which one I would end up using. So I took a good look at all 3 of them, and I was very pleasantly surprised at how this one dried. And so I started using my favorite pens, which I showed a little while ago, and I also got my dotting tools ready and my acrylic paint for my dotting. And then I decided to outline those blue circles that were still very present. And as it goes with these paintings, with these creations, I don't really know what I want to do. I just go into it. I look at the piece, I look at the different shades, and I see if there is something that sparks my interest. And these blue areas have definitely sparked my interest, and so now I'm finding myself outlining them with some neurographic lines. I look at it, and if I like the composition, I will leave it. If I feel like it needs something else, I will add something more to it. And this is why I added these 3 little circles in the top. Sometimes I bring in old doodles, and by old I mean doodles that I have done before that I have come to like, and this one was one of them. And if you have been watching my content regularly, you might recognize this one here. I have used this one at least a couple of times. And I just love how the white lines break up the composition. And just so you know, all of the things that I use in my videos, they're usually listed down below in the description box. So if you want to know what kinds of pens I use, I have them listed. I start usually outlining my composition with a finer pen, and then I go in and sometimes use a thicker one just to give the piece more focal points to look at. Sometimes the lines need to be a little bit thicker, other times I leave them thin. I've also started where the lines meet, where I do my neurographic rounding out of the corners. I started tapering the lines off, and I quite like that look. I'm always looking at the composition as a whole, and I decide if it needs more lines, if it needs more doodles. Of course, I could fill it up all the way, but I am trying to restrict myself with the lines and the doodles as a whole, because I have done quite a bit of testing and figuring out what I like personally. So now that I know what I gravitate towards, I like to just keep it at a minimum, just to challenge myself. It's easy to fill up a whole page with doodles, and I say easy, not it comes easy, but you know, you could just go on and on is what I'm trying to say. If you don't limit yourself, you would find places to doodle on all over the page, but that's not what I'm going for. So I bring in my lines, and I like to call these cobblestones, and my dots, and all those things that I seem to enjoy doing these days. Will it stay this way forever? Probably not. I have changed my creations quite a bit over the past year as I'm learning how to create a composition, and as I am figuring out what looks good for me for my eye. I don't know what other people feel like when they look at my pieces. Most of the feedback is very positive, which I'm happy about. That tells me that I'm doing the right thing. But what is okay and great for me might not be for you, so I encourage you to find your own style. Sometimes a piece speaks to me, meaning I have a feeling that it belongs somewhere. And that doesn't happen very often, but it did happen with this one. And when I realized it, I'm not gonna lie, I started tearing up a little bit. And you may have noticed it when you read the title for this video. I had just heard about the devastating news of the wildfires in Hawaii, particularly Maui. And when I created the background for it, like I said, I wasn't confident that I would immediately go back to it and doodle on it. And that's why I had created 2 more. But when I came into the studio in the morning and looked at it again, something pulled me towards it. And as I was drawing the circles first, I wasn't thinking much about it, but as I was continuing to embellish it and adding the lines, they just looked like islands to me. And of course, this is an abstract painting, and to somebody else it doesn't look anything like islands. When you get that feeling when you create something, you just can see it in your mind, and that is what I love about the abstract painting part. To somebody else, it might look like just a bunch of circles and embellishments. But to the creator, it has a much deeper meaning, and that is very satisfying. And I'm kind of glad and happy that I can share this insight with you here on YouTube. Let me know in the comments below what you saw when you were watching this composition evolve. I am always so curious to hear what you see in my pieces. Ever since I visited Hawaii for the first time, I felt this very strong connection to the islands. We got married on Maui 18 years ago, and we've been back a few times since. And so my heart is just very heavy today, thinking of the people there. And as we're finishing up this video, I hope that you take a moment and send some good vibes and some good thoughts to the people of Hawaii, and hope that their aloha spirit is still strong with them, and that they will recover quickly and get help from people. As always, thank you so much for watching today's video. I will see you next time.